Nike could stand out like a sore thumb if the only Nike you can get on Amazon is at full price, whereas you can either go other places to find Nike, or you can get Adidas, Asics, Brooks, and everything else at, sort of more traditional online discounts when you go to Amazon.
This is the E-Commerce Braintrust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Braintrust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Hello and welcome back to the E-Commerce Braintrust podcast. This is your host, Kiri Masters. And first of all, thank you for coming back if you're a listener of the show. We did miss an episode last week as it's been a pretty hectic start to spring and conference season and business picking up. So thanks for coming back and sticking with us. Today on the show, I'm talking with Ken Cassar, Principal Analyst and VP at Slice Intelligence. And we've had Ken on the show before to talk about retail trends and what things look like from Slice's perspective. Slice Intelligence has a consumer panel of more than 5 million online shoppers and uses the data from their purchases to give insights to brands and retailers, contextualizing e-commerce industry trends. And so I wanted to bring Ken back on the show to talk about Nike and the deal that Nike struck with Amazon almost a year ago. We're going to talk about what that deal looked like to clean up Nike's issues with third-party sellers and what happened. Was it successful? What seems to have happened with Nike's sales and share of market? And finally, we dive quite into quite a lot of detail around the marketplace versus vendor model for brands and what the pros and cons of those are, and where Ken thinks things are heading with Amazon's, and where Ken thinks Amazon is heading with regards to its relationships with vendors. So enjoy this wide-ranging interview with Ken Cassar from Slice Intelligence.
We compared July to December 2016 with July to December 2017. So, the idea there is that seasonality is not going to be an issue.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And the deal was announced sometime in like early July, late June. And so the July to December seems like a reasonable time frame to look at.
Yep.
And so what we found is that Nike's share actually dropped by, they went from 19 to 18% and dropped by 1.3 points. So the one thing to just be, super clear on is that, I've seen other folks talk about like L2, I think I saw talking about changes in like how frequently, like the volume of Nike listings and stuff like that. I don't have any of that data. I don't have any data about listings. So just kind of know that really what I have is kind of a sales volume and market share measure for Nike and competitor. Oh yeah. And the other big thing is that, so Nike dropped 1.3 points and during that same period, Adidas was up 3.1.
Oh.
Yeah. So, whether or not there was a direct swap or these were kind of coincidental, from 50,000 feet, it looks like there was kind of a trade of market share and then some in favor of Adidas.
And do you have data on share of sales between 3P and 1P of Nike?
I don't have that.
Okay. Yeah, I think just looking at the listings, because the whole deal was that by selling to Amazon on a 1P basis, Amazon would clean up the resellers. But on every listing that I'm looking at on Amazon, Nike has it's dominated by 3P sellers.
Yeah, I tried to find a Nike listing and couldn't do it. The only thing I figure is maybe they have been doing some cleaning up and it's just been getting rid of the fraudulent stuff, but they're letting resellers that seem to be kind of like playing by the rules anyway. They seem to be letting them kind of stick around. And the thing that surprises me is that Amazon isn't just given how high profile that deal is and given what a big deal Nike is, I'm just surprised that Amazon isn't finding some way to like goose the algorithms to make sure that like Nike first party shows up prominently, but that does not seem to be the case.
All right, so let's rewind to the beginning. And in late June, Nike and Amazon announced a landmark deal where, for the first time, Amazon would actually start protecting Nike's products on Amazon from third-party sellers. So for years, Nike refused to sell its products directly on Amazon on a wholesale basis, believing that by selling on Amazon, it would lead to a loss of control over the Nike brand and pricing and all of the concerns that a lot of vendors have when dealing with Amazon on a wholesale basis. But as brick and mortar retail chains go out of business and more purchasing is pushed online, Nike saw that competitors were active on Amazon, like Adidas. So they took another look and came up with a really interesting deal where Amazon itself was supposed to be taking accountability for protecting the Nike brand on the platform. What usually happens in this situation is that brands have no choice but to take responsibility themselves for detecting unauthorized changes to their product pages, detecting and taking action against unauthorized sellers and counterfeits, and handling other brand protection processes. But in this case, for the first time, Amazon agreed to play an enforcement role within its own marketplace and police the third-party sellers selling Nike products. So we're 10 months approximately into this deal, and now is a good time to assess whether that appears to have been successful. Has Nike regained some share? Are they controlling unauthorized sellers? Are they controlling their brand on Amazon? And so to get a real sense of the numbers before and after the deal, as well as some more of the anecdotal flavor, I have Ken Cassar on the podcast for the second time, so that's really exciting. So Slice Intelligence put together some analysis pre-deal and post-deal for Nike. So tell us a little bit about what the pre-deal data looks like in terms of their market share and what things looks like after the deal.
Sure. And for people unfamiliar with the Slice, we have a panel of 5.5 million people where we're able to see everything that the members of our panel buy online, and we then project that up to the overall U.S. online shopping population. And so the analysis that we did was to looking at the time period after the Nike and Amazon deal was announced. We wanted to see whether there had been a change in Nike's market share. And so I think the hypothesis going into that was that we would have seen an increase given that some of the dodgy sellers might have been removed, and Nike was increasingly going to show up as a first party merchant,
and their content would be better too, right? Because they'd have control over their product detail pages, and in theory be accessing A+ content and storefront pages and all these other features that brands get access to when they're actively involved.
That's right. To the extent that consumers were aware of the deal, consumers should have been comfortable that if they were buying Nike things on Amazon, that it was actually Nike with Amazon looking at it. Now, whether consumers were aware of it or not or whether it was just us in the business is another issue. So the analysis that we did is we looked at July through December of 2017, sales of sneakers on Amazon, including both first and third parties, so those in aggregate. And we compared it to the same time period the year before. So it's July to December 2017 compared with July to December 2016. And what we saw sort of ran counter to our hypothesis that we would have seen an increase in market share. In fact, we saw a decrease in market share. So during that 6-month period that we looked at, Nike was still, both at the beginning and the end, Nike was still the biggest brand in terms of dollars selling on Amazon, but it lost quite a bit of share. So in the first period, our pre-period, Nike had 19.4% of sales on Amazon. In the post period, after the deal was signed, Nike just had 18.1%. So there was a drop of 1.3 share points. It looks as though Adidas was the biggest share gainer, it having gone from 13.2 to 16.3% share over that time period for an increase of 3.1 points.
Yeah, that's pretty significant.
Yeah. I would have expected that we would have at least seen flat market share if the deal was slow to really kick in, or perhaps we would have seen a bit of an increase. So all I can figure is that implementing the deal that Nike and Amazon have in place is just taking a while, and that we really aren't seeing a manifestation of what ultimately is going to come of that. Yeah,
I think that's a decent point. And we were both talking about how when we were looking on Amazon, looking at various products, I was just looking at shoes, and I don't see a first party offer like sold and shipped by Amazon for any of the products that I looked at. So, from a small sample size, and these were what appeared to be the top selling products on Amazon for Nike. All of the offers are from third party merchants.
Yeah. Similarly, I was not able to find a Nike product, and I looked at, the higher end Air Jordans, and looked at some of the, the lower price products, and I couldn't find a first party item.
Yeah. And what made this deal so interesting is because it was the first time, like I mentioned before, the first time Amazon had agreed to police their own marketplace for a brand. And we get a lot of inquiries from brands who want to ensure that there's no third party selling their brands on Amazon. And the reality is that's just not going to happen. It's set up as a marketplace where Amazon wants to ultimately promote having multiple sellers on a product listing, because it is, in theory, going to drive more price competition, more availability of products and things like that. So Amazon's not going to ever do anything about unauthorized sellers unless they are selling counterfeit products. And that's always been some kind of problem, but seems really
I would have assumed that Amazon would have gone to some pains to ensure that Nike first party or Amazon first party sales of Nike products would have boiled to the top search results at least some of the time. But at first glance, and again, we don't know how deeply implemented this deal is yet.
Right.
But at first glance, it looks like Nike's really kind of reluctant to put its finger on the scale, and that Nike is still letting algorithms kind of drive which brands and which sellers are going to the top of the list.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we have two huge companies. Amazon seems to move pretty quickly and seems to have staved off heavy bureaucracy from making decisions and implementing things, but it could just be some kind of bureaucratic lag with implementing the program. But it has been 10 months basically since we found out about this deal.
Yeah, and Amazon has been reluctant in the past to put its finger on the scale. So, when a giant brand has a new product that they want to sell on Amazon, it doesn't work like it works in the offline world. If Nabisco is releasing a new flavor of Oreo that is being supported by a lot of advertising, Walmart and Kroger and big retailers will be more than happy to give it some shelf space and really give it an opportunity to maximize sales given media weight and other things going on. Amazon, though, doesn't work that way. The Amazon approach is, okay, send us a couple of boxes, your new Oreos, and we'll see if consumers buy them. And over the course of time, consumer demand will tell us how prominently we're going to feature, how much inventory we're going to take. Despite the kind of the pleas of some of the biggest, at least consumer packaged goods companies in the world, Amazon has really kind of let the algorithm continue to rule.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're seeing it amongst our own clients who have had relationships on a wholesale basis with Amazon for several years, and seemingly a good one. they've had their direct vendor management removed. And now they don't actually have any human being assigned to their account at all. So all servicing, all purchase orders, all inventory assessments are handled by an algorithm or by a centralized support team. And so there's not that one-to-one negotiation or conversation around what the new product is, what, to your point, what's the outside marketing and promotions looking like. It's just driven very reactively. And that's why we see so many brands who were previously vendors or currently vendors looking to augment their Amazon vendor relationship with a marketplace relationship so that they can actually have the control of selling products at the price they want to sell them at and having enough inventory available that they believe they're going to be able to move.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And there have been a lot of great examples of that, both in the footwear category across CPG and in a bunch of other categories. Mm. And I'm finding, like, amongst clients that we work with, the leading lights seem to be increasingly coming toward that hybrid approach.
Yeah.
Where they're maintaining their own accounts as sellers. They're trying to drive as much Amazon as first party as possible, but they've got to work around Amazon's desire to only sell profitable items.
Yeah.
And so it's a complicated game figuring out how to make Amazon work, but they've got enough share. Mm-hmm. You know, in a typical CPG category, Amazon will have more than 60% share.
Yeah.
That the big brands, no matter how big they are, have no choice but to try to figure out how to play that game.
Yeah, and I think Amazon's just doing what makes sense to them from a bottom line standpoint. It's very capital intensive to be carrying this first party inventory, and that there's a limit to that resource, both in terms of assessing what they should be buying and then actually spending the capital on it and tying up their inventory, their warehouse space with it as well. So it does make sense, and there will always be a place for that first party relationship with CPG products, and the top 5-10% of Amazon's entire catalog. They will want to keep a close eye on that inventory and on that assortment and control as much of it as they can. But looking out into the future, what do you see that looking like? Do you think that there's going to be more automation there, and Amazon's going to continually scale back their vendor purchase orders to really focus in on the top of the top selling products? Do you think that that's the way things are going to go?
Yeah, my guess is that over the course of time, Amazon gets more and more demanding as to what items make sense for them to stock.
Yeah.
So there are probably a lot of items that are just barely not crapped out right now, can't realize a profit, and that over the course of time could find themselves pushed out.
Yeah.
And then, exactly how vendors respond to that is going to be interesting. Certainly, vendors starting up their own 3P accounts is one thing we'll see. But I also think that kind of Amazon's desire to let the algorithm rule everything is going to push more and more brands to be more and more aggressive about their own DTC efforts, their own direct-to-consumer efforts.
Yep.
We've seen a little bit of that. The brands that 2 years ago would never have gone direct are going direct, but it's still early days, and I think brands are trying to figure out whether they really need to figure out how to do that, and if so, the extent to which they should support it with advertising and how they price it, which is the hard part, right? And that is one thing that ultimately Nike's going to have some that may be an under or something that drags Nike down over the course of time, is that as it gets more and more control, as more and more items are its first party, they're going to be at full price. Mm. Nike's not going to want to undercut its wholesalers, mm-hmm. or the folks that it has wholesale relationships with. And so Nike could stand out like a sore thumb if the only Nike you can get on Amazon is at full price, whereas you can either go other places to find Nike, or you can get Adidas, Asics, Brooks, and everything else at sort of more traditional online discounts when you go to Amazon.
Yeah, it's a great question around business model for these brands that have typically operated on a wholesale model. I spoke with a brand last week who's very much a traditional wholesale model in the apparel category and is being pursued by Amazon's vendor team, but were told that if they were going to sell on as a first party vendor on Amazon, that they would have to drop ship all of the customer orders, which is absolutely ludicrous for this company as a wholesale, having a wholesale business model. There's a big difference between inching towards direct to consumer using fulfilled by Amazon or even Amazon's vendor program and sending them inventory and then they fulfill the orders to, okay, you're becoming a vendor, you're going to sell inventory to Amazon at a wholesale rate, but you're going to have to carry the operational and fulfillment cost of actually fulfilling all of those customer orders. It was the worst deal in the world.
It's a terrible deal for a company that's accustomed to those wholesale relationships. But, it's also long term, is it a strategically smart move for Amazon to, kind of force these guys to become retailers? That is, will it eventually start to undermine the proposition that Amazon has if all of its vendors or a lot of its vendors get good at shipping, to have some of those direct to consumer relationships? Mm-hmm. And, so the question is, long term strategically, might Amazon be overplaying its hand?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I guess we won't know. They play their cards so close to their chest, but we'll see how things shake out. And it's always good to track things like this, like the Nike deal. And 10 months later, it doesn't seem like a whole lot has changed. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But I think the lesson for brands here, as we've been talking about this vendor versus seller or marketplace model, there are lots of considerations and it's becoming increasingly that marketplace model is more suited for many more brands and potentially even for more wholesale kind of companies across their assortment. They might want to divvy up their assortment between wholesale and direct to consumer as well.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to publish the results of Slice Intelligence's findings on the show notes as well, which you can find at ecommercebraintrust.com. And thank you for joining us again, Ken.
Yes, thank you very much, Carrie. It's always a pleasure.
Great to talk to you as always.